first of all, thank you very much, Jennifer, for being with us here today on the bench. This is our space that brings together passionate leaders in sustainable aquaculture to talk informally about what we're seeing in the industry and work collectively for a better future. I was incredibly surprised and excited when the team proposed that we have this chat. I hadn't come across your profile before. I talked to a lot of people in the industry, and it is often the case that everybody's focused on their little area of specialism, whether it's a new technology or production or genetics. And of course, people have very deep knowledge, but it's rare that we have that sort of broader perspective. And that's why I entitled our chat today From Egg to Plate, because I found your story and your focus and understanding of the whole value chain, very interesting. But before we get into sort of the technical aspects of sustainable aquaculture, I wanted you to share with everybody here today your personal story, and when was, what made you interested in aquaculture to the point that you have chosen it as your personal passion and purpose.
But first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here. And with every single conversation, you learn so much. And our initial curiosity conversation was incredible for me as well, with the type of support and importance that all of the work that you're doing is to the industry. For me, it's as all careers are, it's a winding road. And this has been a place where I didn't go off to college saying to my parents, I'm going to have work in sustainable aquaculture. I came to it a little bit by accident. I was a cookbook author, was doing some work in the United States for a group we call our Television Food Network. And my agents reached out to me and they said, we're going to bring to market what we think will be the most sustainable ocean-raised salmon in the world. And I have to say, as soon as I started working on it, I was hooked. I felt like the intersect in the food system, the importance of the direction of where aquaculture was going, the advances, the technology. There were so many pieces of what I call this chain of well-being that really meant that we could change the way in which we look at food and food production and bring aquaculture to a point where it had a seat at the table. So it's been an exciting and incredible journey for me. That was almost 12 years ago.
Wow. I was reading that you referred to challenges and victories that you have witnessed and experienced, across the value chain. And I was wondering whether you could share with us a couple of those stories.
Yeah, it's, as always, right? We have lots of different things that we do. And I think that the thing that got me through the ups and the downs was knowing this was absolutely the right direction. I had no doubt. The first year that we had brought what was this sustainable brand to market, it was the first branded salmon that had ever come to market. And one of the things that was important about that was that we have difficult conversations about aquaculture, about feed models. And I'll never forget sitting with an NGO and having this conversation and them making excuses and getting up and walking out. And I just thought, how short-sighted. 4 years later, that project became the first ever farmed ocean-raised salmon to get a yellow from that organization. And so it's creating dialogue. And sometimes they're difficult conversations. I think some of the victories, my gosh, there have been so many, especially as of late, where we're having more progressive conversations. I just had an incredible conversation with a chef from Disney, and Disney has had really varied, sustainability and sourcing policy throughout the years. And to have a conversation about, well, maybe we need to be talking about and bringing a fish to our cutting table that's not just about price and taste. That when someone chooses something, they should know the background and what they're compromising in putting flavor first. So those are two huge wins, to bring an NGO along and be able to have that dialogue early on, and then to be able to take one of the most important brands in the world and finally have a different type of conversation, that's what fills our heart. And that's frankly what keeps us going.
Absolutely. Those are real success stories to be shared, because I think at this point in time when, we have the various stakeholders, from consumers, producers, regulators, developing an awareness of the challenges. It's so important to develop trust, and trust comes from dialogue, from sharing of information, from transparency, as you say, from getting together more often around the table and being willing to have those, difficult conversations. So I guess the more we can encourage and share those success stories, the better for the industry.
And to keep at it. And to just keep at it, because we're still very much on a journey of humility. We're learning. There are a lot of changes and we have to be open to it, but we can't give up.
What do you see, in that context, the biggest challenges for the industry in the next 10 years from a sustainable point of view?
From a sustainable point of view, it's exciting to see things evolve, particularly on the feed side. We know that we're starting to get great technology in place that's going to help us move away from marine ingredients even more than we already have. So that's exciting. Those insect models, those insect protein models, the wood protein models that still are yet to be completely fulfilled, that's exciting. We've spent a lot of time on feed, and we tend to have that be an important part of the conversation. I think we know that genetics are going to be important. We've seen that in other types of protein production, and I think that will continue, as you know, to get stronger and stronger so that we're putting the healthiest animals in the water. I'm really excited about AI technology and the gathering of data on the farms. That has primarily been one-dimensional. Now we're seeing three-dimensional programs that can tell us about ocean mapping, history, future thinking, so that we can see as climate change comes, what is going to happen and what adjustments we need to make. And then, of course, what is going to be that overlay of things like land-based systems versus ocean-raised systems, and how that ecosystem is going to create the volume of protein that we're going to need to produce.
It really does seem, with the availability and awareness and so many technologies coming together, technology with other production systems, it feels like we're at the beginning of a next wave of revolution, for the sector. And clearly salmon being the leading species in that respect, but hopefully some of these trickling down to other very important species from a volume point of view and their role in more developing countries.
Well, I think that diversity is the key to success. And although we've been blessed with an incredible salmon industry to do a lot of the heavy lifting, that's also where a lot of the mistakes have been made. So we're constantly in a dialogue about the good and the bad of this. And one of the things that is promising is to see these different species and also multitropic systems. So when we look at the role of seaweed, for example, or shellfish that can be provided on a finfish farm. And then, as you mentioned, there's so many things happening. For example, in tilapia, when we look at whether or not aquaculture will truly help us fight nutritional injustice, then we have to have species like tilapia as part of this conversation, because salmon is not going to be able to be available, just the nature, the cost, to the masses. And having these scalable species that can create impact, I think, is enormously important. And we're seeing groups like the Gates Foundation, like IDH and others that are developing that in tilapia, in Africa and other countries. And we can't ignore the role of women in this, that there's such a strong role for women to play as they're feeding their families, their villages, to be able to start to build these systems that are a little bit less resource intensive, but really do provide a nutritive ingredient at a time where protein is going to be, very difficult to supply.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting angle, and really covers the gamut of production systems, from the highly industrialized, scaled, industry that is salmon, to what you describe as the more, small-scale, community-based aquaculture systems, that have such big potential in terms of developing that sustainable access to nutritional food.
I mean, it's what, the future thinkers, Laura Ann Edwards, who's been named one of the future thinkers of the world, top 50, says you have to have global solutions, meaning that industrialized food chain that is going to always be a part of it, that can produce food at scale. But then you're also going to have village solutions, and they have to work in tandem together to be able to create a truly stable system. And I'm proud really of the work that Kvarøy has done, because we're doing work with groups like World Central Kitchens, Jose Andres, where we're actually investing in farms that are going to be rebuilt after some type of a natural disaster, likely as an effect of climate change, hurricanes, earthquakes. We're actually helping rebuild water farms to be able to keep them help them have an understanding and to build systems that are more climate change resilient. So we have one in Guatemala that is a tilapia farm that is actually a pond system. They're building that on land, and they're feeding somewhere between 8 and 9 villages around them with the protein they're producing. Those are inexpensive investments where we can really create impact and stability in communities.
That's what you refer to as restorative aquaculture, Jennifer.
It's if they are in that case, not necessarily so. It's all going to depend on how they're using their resources. Are they using feed models that are restorative rather than marine based? Are they using their water properly? When we talk about restorative systems, you hear regenerative a lot. I prefer to use the word restorative because we're literally needing to have systems like with things like seaweed, shellfish, where we're filtering water, and where what we're doing is really giving back and rebuilding ecosystems that we've already deplenished. So we have to continue to be very conscientious of the fact that these are all ecosystems that we've taken from, and we not only are giving ourselves an even playing field, but we have to be putting inputs back in to be able to fight climate change. So it's something that we're consciously thinking about, particularly at Kvarøy, as we now have one of the first concessions where there's seaweed that's going to be grown, as well as our fish, as well as the salmon, but really thinking about how we can be in contribution to the system, not just what we produce in terms of the food, but thinking about all of the things that surround it.
Gosh, I think I just jotted down about 3 topics to have separate conversations with you on. But I'm very mindful of our time, and I just really want to thank you for your time. Fascinated by your interest in food, all the way from egg to plate, as I say. So really, thank you very much for your time, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an important topic. And I think there's so many amazing people, like everyone on your team, all of those that are working hard to, as you said, bring this to the plate. And it takes all of those hands to do it. And we're going to need to all be working together to be able to create these solutions for the future.
Thank you.